Although death is of course a sad thing, time and again there are people who bring it upon themselves purely out of stupidity. Today you'll see a completely foolish couple in love, a young man whose attempts at flirting go wildly wrong, and a woman who uses a kitchen utensil in the dumbest way possible. So let's get right into it. We start our video with a case that really happened in Boston in 2005 and was even immortal deaths. The American Max Beers was working at the time as a professional fart trainer. And yes, that actually exists. The American was known for being able to make his body, with self-invented exercises and special food, produce huge amounts of gas and release it loudly on command. He passed this knowledge on to young Arnold, a member of a fraternity, because Arnold wanted to win a fart contest at his frat. While Max was training Arnold, he wanted to test his ability. Now let's move on to Chanchal Lahiri, who was known in India under his stage name Jadugar Mandrake. In 2019, the 40-year-old Indian magician came up with an especially spectacular trick. He had himself tied up by several people with heavy steel chains secured with padlocks and then wrapped again with ropes. After that, Jadugar Mandrake was lowered from a ferry into the Ganges River. His plan was to free himself underwater at lightning speed and reappear to the applause of the audience. Instead, he disappeared into the murky water, and even after the spectators had waited more than 10 minutes, nothing happened. His body was eventually found a day later in the river. The next death on our list is also just as tragic as it was avoidable, because it was completely stupid. I mean, honestly, would you give a 9-year-old child an Uzi? That's exactly what a firearms trainer did at a shooting range in the US state of Arizona a few years ago. The man wanted to show a little girl how to fire the automatic submachine gun at targets. For this, he explained to the 9-year-old the functions of the weapon and showed her how to handle it correctly and what body posture to take when shooting. But since the recoil of the Uzi was too strong for the little girl, she pulled it up while firing and fatally shot the firearms trainer. While you can't blame the little girl in that case, the next people in this video who completely misjudged the power of firearms were in fact two adults. 5 years ago, the two American YouTubers Mona Lisa Perez and Pedro Ruiz came up with a particularly daring and above all stupid stunt to impress their followers. For the YouTube video, Pedro held a thick book in front of his chest, and Mona Lisa was supposed to shoot at her boyfriend from just 30 centimeters away. The two thought that the bullet, like in the movies, would get stuck in the book. Spoiler, of course, it didn't. Now let's get to what is probably the best example of the old saying, "If you won't listen, you must feel." In 2018, the Christian missionary John Allen Chow, despite all warnings and the strictest bans, visited North Sentinel Island near India. North Sentinel Island is completely cut off from the outside world, and its inhabitants are an indigenous people who completely reject contact with outsiders. More precisely, the Sentinelese have so far attacked and killed anyone who dared to approach their island. For this reason, it is strictly forbidden to come closer than 3 kilometers to the island. But John Allen Chow ignored all these warnings and was absolutely convinced that he would manage to turn them into peaceful people. But as soon as he came near the island, he was shot at with arrows. John Allen Chow fled but returned the next day, where he was shot at again. Any normal person would have given up by then at the latest, but John Allen Chow actually made a third attempt to visit the island and was finally killed. Next, we come to a man who went so far for success on the internet that he risked his life for it. We're talking about the TikToker Waffler69, whose real name was Taylor. Taylor had more than 1.7 million followers on TikTok and entertained his fans mainly by stuffing himself with bizarre food in huge amounts. even though that in itself is not all that unusual on the internet, with trends like so-called mukbang being followed by millions of people. Waffler69 went one step further. He ate the unhealthiest things imaginable, such as massive amounts of deep-fried sausages, giant towers of hamburgers, or even an XXL cereal sugar ring. But unfortunately, that giant sugar ring also turned out to be the last thing Taylor ever ate in his life, because in January, he had to be taken to the hospital and died there of clogged arteries at the age of only 33. Alexander Chechik from Russia, the next man on our list, definitely deserves a place of honor on the list of the dumbest deaths. A few years ago, the young man from the city of Labinsk in southwestern Russia wanted to look cool in front of a buddy. So he sent him a text message with a picture of himself holding a hand grenade with the pin pulled. Alexander believed that he could simply put the pin back into the grenade and that it would not explode as long as he didn't throw it. Alexander's friend realized the seriousness of the situation and immediately texted back in shock that he absolutely needed to be careful. But the friend never got another reply from Alexander, because by that time the grenade had already torn him apart. Next up is corporate lawyer Gary Hoy from Canada. Gary Hoy was very successful in his profession and therefore had a fancy office on the 24th floor of the Toronto Dominion Centre, a huge glass skyscraper right in the middle of Toronto. Because the lawyer had also completed an engineering degree before his legal career, he believed he knew that the large floor-to-ceiling windows in his office were absolutely unbreakable. And so Gary Hoy would repeatedly amuse himself by running and throwing himself against the glass in front of astonished clients and visitors to scare them. He did this dozens of times and nothing ever happened. When in 1998 the corporate lawyer had some friends visiting his office, they didn't believe him that the windows were really as strong as Gary claimed. So he took a running start and threw himself against the pane. This time the glass itself held, but the window popped out of its frame, which had already been weakened by the previous jumps, and Gary plunged 24 stories to his death. Since he was the most successful partner in his law firm, it had to close shortly after the lawyer's stupid death. Now let's move on to an incredibly stupid death that took place in 2001 in the Mojave Desert in the US state of California. One evening in April, a young man named Randy decided to consume some substances in the middle of the desert and then enjoy nature. While doing so, he came across a group of so-called furries. These are people who dress up as various animals. The furries were throwing a wild party, and while Randy was off to the side, he spotted someone in a bear costume with whom he wanted to have sex. So Randy approached the bear. Unfortunately for him, it wasn't a furry, it was a real bear, which immediately bit the completely dazed man to death. Let us know in the comments what you think about these people. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video and subscribe. Bye, and see you next time.